Welcome! Today we're gonna throw something really big. And unlike the last two videos I did about throwing big things, where I did everything in one big clay ball, I think the last one was 20 kilo almost, today we're gonna do sectional throwing. And in case you're wondering what sectional throwing is, it's basically the technique of throwing bigger pots in multiple sections. So you throw one section, and then you add another section, and another section, and another section. There's really no limit to how tall you can go with sectional throwing, except, of course, for your kiln. This one was made in sectional throwing, and as you can see, it doesn't look like it's made out of multiple parts. And that's really the point, because you put them together when the clay is still sort of wet enough at least to glue together. But just like any other technique, there are some challenges with sectional throwing. It can be a challenge to actually make them glue together. There can be challenges with how you shape it, and so on and so on. I've been doing quite a lot of sectional throwing, so today I want to share with you how I do it and how you can do it as well. I have a little bit of a disclaimer. This video is rather long. Sectional throwing takes time, and not only that, but in this video I'm going to show you two different pots that I'm going to make. So yes, it is long, but if you are really interested in learning how to do sectional throwing, I encourage you to watch the whole video. And in case you're a little more impatient, you can of course jump through it. And there's also an index down in the description, so you can jump into the different sections of the video. I still hope, despite the fact that it is long, that you will enjoy it. So let's get on with it. As mentioned in the beginning, the good thing about sectional throwing is that you don't have to deal with such a huge ball of clay. So if you are scared about what I did in the last video with 20 kilo of clay, I understand. It is a lot of work to center that much clay. But even with just centering 3 kilos at a time, and I think most people can learn how to center 3 kilo, you can build really large pots using sectional throwing. Today I'm going to try and make a pot as tall as I can, still within the limits of my kiln, so 60 something centimeters. And I made a drawing here. I'm not very good at drawing, but I made it anyway, so don't laugh at me. I'm going to try and make sort of like a very classic shape of a large vase. And as you see, I made these little punctuations. I hope you can see that. It kind of is to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to go to do. First I will throw the lower end of the pot, and then I will take that away from the wheel. Then I will throw the next section of the pot, and unlike the first section, that's not going to have a base because it has to fit on top of this. And what fits here will be the top of the pot. So when I throw it, I will actually turn it around and attach it to the pot. Then I will probably add one more. I don't know, maybe two more. I don't know, time will tell. But to begin with, we will throw the base. And now I mentioned that you could do it with 3 kilos of clay. I'm going to use 5 kilos of clay. I also sometimes did a base with 10 kilos of clay. Of course, the more clay you add to begin with, the taller the first section is going to be. Also, you want the base section to have walls that are not too thin, because if they're too thin, they won't be able to carry the weight of the next sections. So this is not about throwing super thin. This is about throwing solid, but it has to be very, very circular. It has to be, there's no wobbling, nothing, because if it's wobbling too much, if it's unstable, then it will be really difficult to attach the next one. So that's the biggest challenge for the first section. good thing about throwing 10 or 20 kilos is that then when you get down to 5 kilos, it feels like almost nothing, which it is in a way. Many of you would think 5 kilos is a lot of challenge, but just try and throw some more, and the smaller ones becomes easier. So, I think it looks pretty good. Yeah. And as always, with bigger clay balls, it can be difficult to judge the thickness of your foot, and this is still a little bit too big, but not so much. Let me just check again. Yeah, I think this is good. It's maybe 1.5 centimeters or something. It's enough to trim a foot if I decide to do that, but it's not too thick to leave it if I decide that. I haven't decided yet. Always keep your rim tight and compressed. And don't make it too thin, because you want it to be able to hold the next section. I'm going to do the first pull. Still a lot more down here. It's drying out a little bit on the inside. Another challenge with sectional throwing is that because we want this first part to be dried a little bit, because if it's wet and you put the next piece on, it's just gonna fall apart. There's a limit to how much we can reshape it. Once we put the next part on, we can still do a little bit of shaping because it's gonna be like soft leather hard. It's gonna be a little more stiff and a little more difficult. So I want this piece to have the basic shape of what I intend my pot to be. That's also why it's a good idea to make a drawing, even if you draw as bad as I do. So now I have the basic shape of what I was looking for. You see, it goes out a little bit like this. And if I take my drawing again here, this is sort of what I want for the first section. So the next section is going to go out even more and then start going in again. So I think I just want to make sure that the walls are even. Seems pretty good. And I'm just going to scrape off and make sure that it is completely even. I just want to scrape off the excess slip, because I don't want any of that, because we want to dry it as much as we can. Not completely dry, but we want to have it like a medium leather hard stage. So something like this should be good. I don't worry so much about the final surface, because I'm probably going to do some texturing on this one anyway. So I just want to make sure that we have it smooth and free of slip. So I think that looks good. So let me see how tall that is. that is only about 25 centimeter. So I would need one more, will become 50, and then the top should be 60 something. Yeah, so maybe I can make this one in 3 pieces. I hope so. I'll also clean it on the inside. We don't want any excess water in there. We don't want the clay to weaken. And if you look now, it's actually spinning very, very even. There's extremely little wobbling, and that's a good sign. So what I have to begin with, a very flat top. There are many strategies for how you connect the pieces together. You can just put them on a flat surface to a flat surface, and it will stick. It won't be bad. But you can also make a groove and then a small bump on the other one so it fits into it. Or you can make it like a corner cut. There's all kinds of strategies. What I found is that by making a small groove into this and having a top on the other one, it's easier to make it go at the complete correct position. Because the problem is when you put the next one on, if it's a little bit off, it will start wobbling, and that's going to haunt you for the rest of your pot. So by having this little groove, you kind of get an easier way to put it precisely. So to do the groove, I just want to make sure that there's enough water so it's not dry. And you can use any tool. Some people just use a finger. I just use this tool. It doesn't have to be super big or anything. Just a groove that's enough for the other section to go into. Yeah, I think that's going to be okay. It's just as a guide. It will help it get into place. So now we're done with this first section. And you could just leave it and dry for a few hours, maybe overnight or something. But you could also dry it with a heat gun. And I'm going to do a little bit of that. I use a heat gun to just dry it a little bit, and then I'm going to set it aside, and then we'll check later if it's stiff enough to carry the weight of the next one. And be careful not to dry too much up here, because we want this to be most wet and then more and more dry, because we just want it to be able to carry the weight. We don't want this to be so dry that it don't connect to the next part. So now it feels a little more, not leather hard, but just a little more stiff. I will take this and put it aside, because I usually do it in pairs of 2 or 3 at a time, so they can have time to dry in between. So let's throw another one. As mentioned, after throwing 20 kilo of clay, centering 5 kilos like nothing. So that's the advantage of going really big. There are 2 things you should do before you move the first section. One of them you can do afterwards, but the first one you should do now, because I always leave a mark on the bed, because even though you would think that the beds are identical on both sides, They're not always. If there's just a little bit of difference, then they will wobble more when you put them back. But by adding a mark, you know where to put it back. The other thing you want to do, and you can wait with that. Now I did 2 pots today, so of course it won't stay. But you want to measure the width of this groove that you made, because the next pot, and that's the second difficult thing about sectional throwing, is the next pot should fit perfectly into this. So you want to measure the exact width, and because I made the groove, I want to measure the width in the center of the groove. But of course you can do that after you put it aside. And so in this case we're just going to blow dry it a little bit, and then we'll put it aside before we start working on the next sections. If you're working in a community studio, or just work in a workshop where you have enough space to have 2 wheels, that actually makes it a lot easier, because then you don't have to remove this. And every time you have to move around big pots, there's a risk of warping and stuff. So by having 2 wheels, you can just leave the first part here, and then you can throw the next section on the other wheel and bring it here, and another section and bring it here, another section and bring it here, and let it dry on this wheel until it's solid enough to move it. That makes it a lot easier. I only have 1 wheel, so I have to remove this and then throw the next section, put the first section back on, put it on, and then move the 2 sections that are now glued together, make a 3rd section. So it's a little more risky doing it that way, but if you're careful enough, it works for me, so it can work. I'm just saying. Now I'm ready to throw the second section. I'm going to throw it with 5 kilo of clay again. It is a little more safe if you add less clay to your sections, because it's going to be less of a burden on the first one. But I'm going to take the chance, and it should work. I've done it before. Unlike the first section, this section is not going to have a bottom, because it needs to go on top and there needs to be a hole. So it's going to be bottomless, but I'm not going to throw it all the way out to the sides, because if you do that, the only attachment to the bat is going to be the sides, and it makes it very vulnerable to slipping around and making it wobbly. So I'm going to leave a little thicker there in the bottom, but still with a hole big enough for me to get my hand in. And then you can expand it once you have it up there. So we'll get back to that in a moment. So basically it's the same thing, and if you look at my wonderful drawing here, it's basically a shape that looks almost like the first one. So it's going to be narrow here, and then it goes out to the size of the first pot, because we're going to turn it around. So it's going to be a little awkward when you throw this, because it's upside down. And so the most important thing is that we match the width of the other pot, and already took a measurement. So this is the size that we're aiming for. It have to be very precise, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So let's make this one. And for this one, it's maybe even more important that it's very well centered. And all the way down to the bed. Makes it a little easier in a way that you don't have to measure the bottom. The size, the width of the foot is not super important, because you can adjust that once you throw it around and attach it to the other pot of the other section. You have to be a little more careful when you're pulling this, because it's only attached to a little bit of clay at the bottom. So you could pull it off and then you have to start all over. It's not uncommon for the second section, if you throw the same amount of clay, that it turns out a little bit taller because, I mean, after all, we're not using any clay at the bottom. So still want to keep this dry though. You don't want all that water to be in there because then when we turn it around, that's going to hit us. So now I just want to check and see where we are. It's actually very close. It's just maybe 1 centimeter more, something. That's perfect. So my eyesight is still okay. Another thing is you have to be careful about, I sometimes make that mistake of making it too thin here and then thick. So thick and then too thin, because then it's going to collapse here. So you want to make sure that you have enough strength at that point just below the rim. So now I'm going to check again. Yeah, we're about the same width. So it needs to be a little wider. But it's always easy to make it wider. It's very difficult to make it more narrow. So no worries here. Yeah, I think that's good. So now I'm just gonna make this a bit pointy so that it will fit into the groove that I created on the other pot. It doesn't have to be much. Just a little bit. I just want to check one more time. Yeah, spot on. And I want to see, just to be sure. Yeah. Just want to tighten it up just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's perfect. So now I want to do the same thing that I did to the bottom. Just gonna scrape off any excess slip, and now we're almost ready. This part also have to be stiffened up just a little bit. I don't want this to be as dry as the lower part, but still, if it's too wet, there's a risk when I turn it around that it collapses. So we definitely don't want that. So I'm just gonna make sure that first of all that there's no slip on the sides. And I may also just do it on the inside. Yeah, there was a little bit of slip, not too much. And last part with the sponge, get rid of the water in here. It's mostly because otherwise it's gonna splash all over when I turn it, so I don't want that. So I'm gonna dry this also with the blow dryer, just a little bit, and then we will put it on top of the first part. I'm gonna stiffen this mostly in the middle because I don't want this to be too dry because that has to connect to the pot. I don't want this to be too dry either because I'm gonna pull and shape that. So mostly in the middle. It feels better now, but I mean it's a judgment call. I guess it's called. I don't think there's any objective way of measuring this, but you can wiggle the clay a little bit, and if it wiggles very easy, then it's way too soft. This is stiffening up. Okay, I'll give it just a little more, because I mean I can always soften the clay because it's not going to be bone dry, you know. So even if it's a little too dry, I can always, wet it up and still throw on it. Yeah, I think this should be good enough. So now we're going to remove this and put the first pot back. So I have to put it over here. And now when you're working with multiple pots at a time, make sure that the one you measured is the one you actually put back. That looks good, still round. And again, you can sort of feel how stiff it is, and this is actually pretty good, I think. This is a tricky part of it, because if it's not stiff enough and you turn around and put the other part on it, it's going to collapse. I tried that. I think if you don't try that, you don't know how stiff it needs to be. But yeah, I think this is going to be good. Now we come to, I think, maybe one of the most tricky parts, because we have to turn around upside down the top part that we have on the bed. So let's try and do that. So here we have the top part, and we're going to put that. So this part should go into the groove. So we have to turn this around and hope it doesn't fall off the bed. It usually doesn't. But when you do that, you have to do it like in one fast go, because if you turn it around very slowly, the pot is going to bend, and then it won't fit and it won't be even. So I usually bring my hands to position like this, and I hope I hope it will stick. If it doesn't, it fails. So let's go and see. 1, 2, 3. It did. It worked. So now I just have to fit it, which can also be tricky. But we have the groove, and hopefully it will fit right into it. Yeah. It's a little bit too big. Let me see. Yeah, it's sticking out a little bit here. Sometimes you can save it and move it a little bit. Yeah. I think it's going to survive. It's sometimes I tap it a little bit. It should have been a little bit smaller, but when we turn it, it looks okay. I think we can save this one. Maybe not. So let's move on with the attachment. Before I move my bed, I'm going to just make sure that it sits well. So I sometimes tap it a little bit, and you see, it almost looks centered, so not too bad. So now we can cut off the bed. Let me just take off the camera a little bit. What I do is, I don't want to bend the whole pot here, so I put my my body next to it, and I just gently cut it off, because I don't want to move it. So that was good. And this is why we need a hole here that's big enough for my hand to get in, but it doesn't have to be so big. Now we have a lot of thickness up here, but I can throw that. So now, before I start throwing on this, I want to just take this small part we have here, bend it into the pot. You would think that you should just go all the way around, but what I found is that if you do that, you push the pot. So this is on one side, then I go to the other side, and I do the same thing. Just gonna mold this in, and then I go in between the two, so something like this. And then I go in between those two, and I try to do the same thing on the inside. And then we go in between those two. And in between. Yeah. I think we need to go in between those two here. And in between those two. Those two. And then at some point you can just take the rest. But it's just when you secure it in opposite sides before you do everything, then well, they tend to not be pushed around too much. It could have been a little bit smaller, but I think we can make it. The goal here is to, first of all, make it very, very solid. You want it in the end to be like one pot. If not, then first of all, it doesn't look so well. But of course, there's a much higher risk of breakage right here in this connection. So the more it can be massaged into each other, the better. But at least it didn't collapse. And it's still, I mean, it's relatively okay. So I'm just gonna moisten it just a little bit, not too much at this point. I'm gonna use the rib, not too much at this point, just gently trying to mold it into each other. And see, it's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. See, now you can't almost see it. It'll get better, but at least now we secured it. And as you can see, the pot is almost still centered and not too wobbly. So I'm just gonna wet this top a little bit because this is now very thick, because this is the button I was talking about that I didn't want to make too thin, because if it's too thin, there was no surface to hold on to my bed. So now I just want to moisturize this top a little bit and try and expand this. And still at this point, you need to be careful. This should be softened up, because if you just grab onto this and pull it, you're gonna add too much torque on this part, which is still sort of the weak part. So I want to make sure that I'm not putting too much stress on that lower part. I'm adding some water. I'm not dripping it. I'm just trying to massage it into it. So, and then I'm just squeezing it up. I don't want too much slip to and water to stay on the side of this pot, because I really don't want to weaken the clay too much. And so even though I had to soften it a little bit to be able to pull it. I really don't want it to be too soft. I'm just going to rip it a little bit. I know it's a little bit difficult to see now, and of course it's the shape is not perfect now, but let me just move the camera a little bit back. So, let me see. The size of it now is 48 centimeter, so almost 50 centimeter, which means that by the time that I shape this a little bit and I want to have the top go in a little bit, there should be room for one more section. So my plan of 3 sections looks like it's turning out right. I think I wanted to go out a little bit more here. And down here at the lower part, I can't push it too much at a time because, as you remember, we dry that, so it's a little more stiff. Yeah, that's much better. Still want to make sure that my top is not flaring out and still leveled. But yeah, that's definitely better. One of the problems I usually have with this is that on the inside, of course, you can't see that, there could be a little more clay where they connect. And theoretically, it's not so good because you want even thickness on the sides, because otherwise when it dries and when it fires uneven, dries uneven, and there's a high risk of cracking. So I will try and see if I can remove some of it. Take a rim on the inside, and I'll take some of that away. I'll put it more directly into it and then just hold back with the rim on the outside. So I'm getting something, and it looks much better now. You can't see it, of course, but it looks much more even now on the inside, and that's good. I think we're getting closer. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's getting there. You could also use a trimming tool to cut away some of that. It's usually easier if you turn the wheel the other way around, because I don't want to be cutting this with my left hand, so I'm cutting with the right hand. I'm just going very slowly. Just gonna see if I can take out this. Yeah, I think that was good. Yeah, that definitely made it better. It can take some time to, oh, I need to get it back to the right turning here. It can take a little bit of time to massage this, but take your time. I found that this is the most difficult part of the sectional pots, and if you get this right, you're almost in goal. So it needs to be smooth, it needs to look good, and it needs to be well connected. So and now it feels so much better. I wish you could kind of feel on the inside with me, but I guess you have to go and do your own part. Even though I am trying to get the shape perfectly the way I want it, I've seen potters that can do all these amazing shapes just like that, and they're perfect. I'm not that good, so I get as close as I can, and then I finish things up with the trimming. which is fine too. There's nothing wrong in trimming. I hope not. One thing I do want to do when it's a little more dry is I want to cut the foot a little more, so like this curve continues down here, and I think I have enough clay for that. But you don't want to cut away or throw away too much clay there to begin with, because there's a lot of clay that needs to be held up, and it's just needs that extra clay down there, and it's easy enough to cut away when we get to trimming. I also want to clean the inside. There was some water got in there. Even though I tried not to get it in there, still. Yeah, because you don't want the bottom of the pot to soak in water, because it's a sure recipe for cracks. So yeah. With a big pot like this, you need to move away a little bit to get the picture, and I think actually it's pretty good. I need to pull a little more up here, but before I do that, I wanna heat this a little bit, because it's now been soaked and it's been glued together, and I just want to make sure that before I start pulling here, I'm not pulling it completely out of shape. Yeah, I think that's good enough. You don't want to heat it too much just from the outside, because then it will be dry here and wet on the inside, and that could, I don't know, do something bad. So now I want to pull, because we still have too much clay up here from the turning of the top section. It's not unlikely that after all this putting sections together and pulling and turning and stuff, that the top here is not completely even. And it's a lot easier to attach the next part, the last part, if it is completely even. So if it's like this one, you may wanna cut it. I use a needle tool for that, and don't go too fast, and keep your hand steady. Like that. So now we have a top that's completely even. And it's just gonna make adding that last section a little better. So let's just check again. Now after expanding and pulling, it could have changed the height a little bit. It's 43, 44, something like that. When you make it wider, it always loses some height. So now it's 40, what was it, 44, something like that. And if I want it to be 60 something, then we need to add another 20 centimeters or so. It should be possible. We don't need that much clay for it, because it's much smaller up here, and it needs to be even smaller before it flares out. So I would estimate we probably need 3 kilos, should be plenty. So for the last section, 3 kilo. So all in all, we then thrown about 13 kilo. And some of it is going to be trimmed away too, so it won't be super heavy. So this is a good example of how you can throw something much bigger and even and end up with much slimmer walls, thinner walls than you would otherwise if you just thrown it in one big bowl. At least in my experience. So now I just want to do the same little trick that I did with the first section. I'm going to make a little groove in this one to help me position. Need to stand up for this. So now I'm ready to do the last section. It's getting more and more scary every time you have to remove these bigger and bigger pots. That's why it's so much easier to do if you have two wheels, but I don't. So but it usually goes out pretty well. So so now we're ready to do the last part, and this is just about 3 kilos, so maybe a little more, but it feels so small. And again, we go all the way down to the bed. And then when you pull this out, be careful. You can very easily drag it out of shape. If you're careful, it usually works out pretty well. Ah, look, this is what can happen. I think I can save this. Oh. See, that's exactly what can happen. Push it too much, push it out. So, now I'm doing it again. Sometimes you realize maybe it's too late for me to do anything today. Let me just check. Yeah, not wider than this. So I think actually, before I pull the rest, I just want to curl it in a little bit. It's always easier to expand it. I know I said this a lot of times, but just want to remind you. Let's see. Getting a little bit too big here. This is not so super wide, so it's much more easy to color in. Yeah, that's much better. But I think with all the mistakes that I made in the beginning, I will have to cut off the top here. So, that's no problem. Scrape off the slip. Yeah, it looks good. Clean my bed so I don't get too much water in my head when I turn it. Yeah. And now I just want to dry it a little bit. So, now we're ready to add the last part. It still looks round-ish. I'm just gonna add a little bit of slipped water into the groove to make sure that it glues well. And now we're gonna turn this the same way as we did with the last one, up and around. It worked. gonna see if it fits. It does. I think it may have needed a little more heating, so I'm just gonna do that now. I think it's okay. It's a little uneven, but I think I can work this. Let's hope we can. Worst case, you can cut it off and do a new section, but I don't hope we'll do that here. I think it's okay. I'm just gonna, again, connect it here, connect it on the other side, and in between, and in between, and in between that, between that, between that. Let's try and go around. This is definitely not perfect. I think it's a little bit uneven, and that was not supposed to be. But I think I can save it. Also, I think we got way too much clay here, so in any case, so I think we will save it. I think I will cut off some of the clay because I think we have way too much. This is a good example of how things can go just a little bit wrong or not exactly the way you expected, and still you can hopefully save it. Yeah, that was a lot better. Now at this point, I should probably also check the height because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I do have a limitation on my kiln. It's 62, 3, 4, depending on whether I remove the bottom plate. So let me see. Right now we're at 60, 61, 62. So it can't be much higher than this. So I can actually try and bulb it out just a little bit, and that would be nice. I have plenty of clay to do that. So I think I'm gonna leave it for now. It still needs a little bit of trimming to be a good shape, and it may not be the best pot I ever made, but it was demonstration. We made 3 sections. It's still turning around. It's not too wobbly. I think it's still a success. It's really difficult when you do sections to get the shape you want. When you just have one piece, you have that one piece to mold, but it's a lot more tricky. So leaving enough clay in your pot will give you a lot of leverage to trim it. I will leave it until tomorrow, maybe a couple of days, and then I'll trim it. So see you then. Now it have dried overnight, and it's still sort of a soft leather hard. But I'll start doing some trimming now. Not all of it, because it's still a little bit fragile, but by trimming some of it now, we're going to remove the clay that we don't want to dry anyway. So we get down to the layers that we want to dry. I'm going to start in the upper half. I would like to get this done as well. I may take a little bit of that bulb here, but I don't want to cut too much down here because I want that to dry a little bit more, because it will get a little more unstable, at least when it's still sort of wet. Even though I let it spin slowly when I dried it, it still dried a little bit uneven. So it has become a little bit wobbly. But as you see, when it's not turning, nobody will notice. But I would have liked it to be a little less wobbly next time. See, I think it's already getting more elegant. There was a bit too much clay here, so I'm cutting away some of that, and I still want to continue this down and cut a little more of the bottom, but I'm gonna wait with that because it's still too soft. One of the trimming tools that are really good to use on very large surfaces like this, and I think I showed you in the last video, is a hacksaw blade. You can also use other kinds of metal, like some people use just a measurement tool, or I even went to a potter for a workshop that used a big saw. any metal, and especially if it's bendable. But it's nice with this long one because it's easier to make a continuous curve. Yeah, you see, it works just like any other trimming tool. And it's super cheap. I don't know, I pay $1 for 5 of them or something in a hardware store. So now it's getting better. It's getting much more shape, at least the right kind of shape. I still think maybe to cut in a little bit more here. Still need to cut a little bit on the shoulder. Yeah, it's getting much better now. I think once I get the last part of it cut, I think it's gonna be a decent shape. And I mean, it is wobbling a little bit, but I don't think it's so bad. I can cut as much away as I want because this one is not going to be textured. I sometimes texture these large pots, but this one is going to be glazed with the combination of my floating blue and oxides that I showed you a couple of videos ago. I think I can put a link somewhere. And it's going to be very interesting in itself, just by the glazing. Especially with the small trimming tools, it's difficult to get like that even curve that I'm looking for on a pot like this. So this tool is much more helpful in doing that. You can also buy big trimming tools, but they're very expensive, and this one works so great and it's super cheap. Yeah, now it's much more even. Still need to take a little bit off here. It doesn't scrape off so much, but it helps to clean up the surface. So if there's something where I want more removed, I'll I will go to smaller tools, more surgical. With bigger pots like this, in general, you know, when you start trimming or and when it dries, also more you're taking away more clay. And so, even though this was made with 2 times 5 kilo and then 1 3 kilos, so 13 kilo, I don't know, it's probably going to end up being more close to 8 kilos something when it's bisque fired, which is fine. I just begin to take a little bit down here, but not too much. I'm afraid I'm afraid to make it too unstable now. But even just with this, you see, now it's beginning to get there. And when it dries a little more, let me just check inside. Yeah, I still have plenty of clay here. It's not super thick, but when it dries a little bit more, I can cut away some more and make it even more elegant. Maybe also here. I don't dare to take much more now. I will let it dry a little bit, few hours. I don't have anything else I need to do on this wheel this afternoon, so just gonna let it stay here so I don't have to move it back and forward. That's a little more safe. So I'll get back to you and do the last trimming in a few hours. Last night I did a little more trimming to just perfect the shape. I trimmed down the foot a little more when it was dry enough to sustain the weight. And I also used a metal rip to just scrape the surface and make sure that it was nice and smooth all the way. I also made a small foot. I'm using this foot tool that I got from Old Fort. You could also make it yourself, but I had to get some other stuff from him anyway. So it's nice. You just put it down and you put it in, and you can make this small foot. The primary reason for this is I want to use a lot of the combination glazes I use with oxides under and over, and then my floating blue and some white on top, and it's gonna run a little bit, not crazy. So this foot is gonna work as a glaze catcher, but also like it kind of, you know, end the pot in a nice way. So there's a visual and a functional reason for this. But now the pot is ready, so I will cut it loose and I will put it aside for drying. It's still, I mean, it's not wet, but it's leather hard, and it will take at least some days, maybe a week or two, to dry up completely. This pot and the way it turned out is actually a very good example of how, when you do the sectional throwing and you think, oh no, it's not perfect, it's wobbling and it's not the perfect shape that I wanted, and it can actually still turn out really nice. Of course, this, now I'm just gonna take my paper, it's got all dirty and everything, but you see, it didn't actually turn out exactly as I wanted. I was aiming for a shoulder that was a little higher, but I just didn't get there. Sometimes the clay wants what the clay wants, but I think all in all, this is a really good example of a pot that actually, it's not the best sectional throwing I've been doing. I must admit that. It was getting a little bit wobbly. I did have some problems with the middle connection. But then, after letting it dry a little bit, trimming it, letting it dry a little bit more, trimming a little bit more, I think it actually ended up really good. I like the shape, even though it's not exactly like my terrible drawing. And if you look now, it's spinning slowly. I don't think it wobbles a lot. I think it's actually, you know, relatively straight. Now I'm ready to do the second pot, and for this I will try and see if I'll try and see if I can get a little bit closer to my drawing. And to do that, what I failed with the last time is that it's sometimes really tricky. You have to think upside down when you're throwing. And so for this second piece, as you see, it's actually slimmer here than it is here. So I need actually to pull it like this, because then when I turn it around, it's going to continue that that curve out, and then I'll take it in a little bit to do the last section, the top. So I'll try that. That also means that I have to do the base very wide, because the base has to be wider than the top of the next pot. I'm just gonna measure that. So I have the goal. So this is what I'm aiming for. So the base have to be bigger than this. Also, in this part of the video, I'm not going to talk so much, because I think I already talked plenty in the first part. So just going to try and throw this. Now we're ready for the tricky part with turning it. And here we go. Yep. And now let's see how well it fits. It looks good. All the way around, it looks good. So try and cut this away. Again, do it very gently and support with your body, so you don't bend it. There we go. Now we're gonna do like we did last time and just attach them. As I mentioned, this is actually a little too much a cylinder, because I want to continue this. So we need to get out here a little bit. I don't know if you can see it here, but this is have this curve, and now it's going straight up. So I want to continue this out here, so we get a wider top than what we have now. That's going to take a little bit of work. So this is looking much better in terms of the basic shape that I was looking for. We still have an awful lot of clay in the top here, so I'm going to try and see if I can probe it a little bit. And see, now we have a much more continuous curve all the way out here, which is what I was sort of looking for. Still a little bit too much clay up here. So you see now I'm beginning to get in here at the very top. So this is going to be the widest part of the pot. I think this one is turning out better. The basic shape I have here is more what I was aiming for with the first one too, but sometimes just don't get it right. But yeah, I like this shape better. I think actually maybe I will keep it out on the top and just go in on the last section. So I'm actually doing some sort of wet trimming already, which is something you can do. I still have a little bit of a bulb on the inside, and last time I was trying to remove it from the inside, which is something you can do, but you could also just try and push it out. So make it even on the inside. Sometimes it's easier if you use a rib. So now it's smooth on the inside, but of course now we moved the bubble. Now it's too thick on the outside. Sometimes it can be a little bit easier to remove it on the outside. So I'm going to do some wet trimming. To do that, you have to hold on to what you trim off, because otherwise it's going to glue to your pot. So instead of removing that extra clay from the inside, just going to remove it from the outside. So I push it out from the inside. It's nice and smooth on the inside. And I'm just going to make sure that we don't have too much clay here where the two sections are connected. See, now it's almost smooth. I'll take a little more. I think that looks good. I think that will be nice, and then we'll cut it a little bit more at the foot. So now I'll just dry it up a little bit and then do the last part. But let's just, for the fun of it, check how tall this is. It's 42. So the top, unlike the second section we made, is going to be more or less like a bowl, because I want it to go in. So something like this, turning it around, it will be like a bowl. So we'll have a foot that's about the size that I want the top to be, and then it will flare out into the size of this top. It's difficult when you have to think upside down. I sometimes mess it up, but I think it will be good here. So the last section. Yeah, now we're getting very close. So at this point I have to be extra careful, because this one is going to be difficult to bring in. So I don't want to overshoot. Yeah, that's exactly on the spot. Yesterday I got caught up in some business I had to attend, so I couldn't finish off this pot. But it had been wrapped in plastic, and it's a little too hard, but a little too stiff, but it's still just, there's a little bit of wiggle room. And I think if I wet up the edges and also on the first part, I think it should be okay. I'll try. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, seems to work. The fit is good. And now, because it's so much stronger, I think I can push it a little bit more here. So I'm gonna gently cut it. I just want to see if it's decent enough. So I'm just gonna start out as we did before, connecting it. It is a little bit on the stiff side. It would have been better to make it yesterday, but I still think we can save it. And the top here is still pretty soft, so that's what was the bottom, so they always dry a little slower. So gonna soften it a little bit more and then try and mold it into each other. I think I'll need to do the same thing as I did to the other connection and then just trim it a little bit. I think it looks okay. So I'm just gonna try and work out the top. It is a little more difficult because, yeah, it got too dry. But I think if I slowly work it, it's will be possible. Just give it time. I'm just gonna take a quick measure because, as I told you, my kiln is can only sustain about 63, 62, 64 centimeter, depending on whether I remove the bottom shelf or not. And right now it's 63, so it can't get much higher. But let me just see the shape here. I think it can go out a little bit if I can push it out. I think that's becoming actually really nice. So I didn't end up exactly like my drawing. I just never do. I blame my drawing abilities on this, but it's close enough. And just like the first vase we did, I will like take this curve we have here and continue it down here. So this part is going to be slightly cut. So we'll have a little more of an elegant shape, and that will also make it look a little wider here. But I don't think I want to do anything more now. The rest will be up to the trimming. And despite the fact that it seemed very wobbly when we just put it on, I think it's actually surprisingly even now. Just scrape off any excess slip we have here. The rest can be managed with my trimming. So now it needs to dry for, yeah, well, at least until tomorrow. And I'll just let it slowly spin on my wheel, because that way I will secure that it dries evenly. And otherwise, if it dries a little bit uneven, it will bend to whatever direction dries first. So by spinning it very slowly, there's a better chance that it will stay even. So I'll get back to you for the trimming. Now it's been spinning around all night, and it's getting more to a sort of a leather hard stage. So I think it's safer now to trim the foot to the size that I want and do the last shaping of it. Similar to the first part I did, I want to trim a little bit of a foot for visual reasons, but also to catch my glazes. Now I like the shape. It's A little bit closer, a little bit slimmer than my drawing, but I like it. Unlike the first pot, I'm going to do some carving in this. And that is super scary because at this point, I made a pot. I put a lot of effort into it and it's actually turned out really nice. And now with the carving, it's make or break. It could make the pot a lot more interesting and it could completely destroy it. But if you don't push yourself, if you don't do scary things, you never, get something that is amazing. This is okay, but carving it could make it even better. A potter I know, he always say you have to push yourself to the edge of disaster. And that's what I'm gonna do now. Before I do the actual carving, I'm gonna mark it up with my needle tool. I'm gonna have these carvings going around it. Maybe in both directions. I'll take a look. So first, I will start out with the needle tool. The next thing I'll do is I will use this. I'm not even sure what it's called in English, but if you went to school, you probably know what it's called. I'll use this as a guide to continue the distance of the carving all the way through the pot. I haven't actually used it this way before, but I think this is gonna work well. I measured the distance here, and then I'm just gonna continue with that and follow the lines. So wish me luck. So now, I don't know how well you can see it, but now I can actually get an idea of this is something I like. I still just scratch the surface, so if I completely didn't like it, I could still, trim it off. But I think I like it. I'm not sure if there should be one on the other end. I don't think so. Maybe I will have cuttings or carvings going from top to bottom too. But I think this is going to be it. So now I need to pick the right tool to make it deeper. The first one I tried, it didn't give me the grooves I want. So instead I'm going to go with this mud tools, also for carving, and see if that works better. A lot of trimming, but we can reclaim it. Yeah, I think that turned out really, really nice. Now it's a good idea to just smoothen all the edges a little bit, at least that's what I want. So I'm gonna use these wonderful sponges. They're not very good for sucking up water, but they're from mud tools, but they're very, very smooth. And so they're good for smoothing out edges like this. I'm just gonna follow the curve down. It's quite easy because it's gonna take me all the way down. So now I really like this. I was thinking about putting also some carvings from top to bottom. I'm not sure about that. What do you think? Well, it'll be too late for you to reply. But yeah, I don't know. Because at this point it looks really, really nice, and there's a risk if I do anything more that it's not gonna look nice. But yeah, living on the edge of disaster. I like that. Because it is on that edge where everything can either turn amazing or completely destroyed, that it's really become interesting. And also, of course, all this carving is going to do wonderful things for my glazing, especially because I'm going to use glazing that really breaks nice over the edges. So yeah, I'm actually quite happy with this. I think that's it for now. I hope this video inspired you to do your own sectional throwing. Even if you're not comfortable with throwing really big lumps of clay, even if you can only send a 2 kilo or 3 kilo, you can still make really big pots. That's the whole secret of sectional throwing. So if you have ambitions of throwing big pots, but you've never done it before, this is a good way to start. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more, I hope that you will subscribe, share, comment if you have any comments, good or bad, and come back soon again. I will be posting a new video every Sunday, as I usually do now, and basically I just hope to see you soon again. Have a good day.